Hi, I'm Renata Leão, now acting as an executive creative director at David Sao Paulo. I'm known in the local market, I guess, for work we did for a fiercely feminist NGO named Asmina. There were definitely some nipples involved in the making of some of the projects we did together. I was also a part of the team that did the rebranding of the Avon account, in which the kick-ass work we did locally ended up influencing the global work for the entire brand. I'm also known for being invited as the first woman to act as one of the leading creatives at David. And thankfully, I guess I'm known also as for the super cool Burger King projects that were launched in 2021 and 2022 in Brazil, one of which I'll tell you the full story in a few minutes. My childhood was very normal, you know, middle-class family, lived in a nice neighborhood at Rio de Janeiro, the third of 4 kids. Parents never got divorced, still, you know, seemed to love one another. In school, I was somewhere between, you know, being an A- and a B- student. I always had my head in the clouds, of course, dreaming of a random future, like being an airline stewardess, an Olympian swimmer, or maybe a nightclub bouncer. I grew up mostly in Rio de Janeiro, but from the ages of 11 to 14, the family and I had a great overseas experience when we moved to upstate New York in a small Jewish town called Chappaquiddick. My parents were my greatest supporters. No self-expression initiative was frowned upon by them, you know, be it playing the drums, dressing up as a boy, or joining a local theater group that rehearsed until late on school nights, all cool with them. As for external inspiration, I was fed mentally and creatively by the mainstream American stand-up comedians from the 80s. There were very few in Brazil when I was growing up, so the Americans really got to me. I loved book cartoons. They played a big part, you know, of the build of my repertoire as well. I'm talking about, you know, Gary Larson's The Far Side collection, maybe Calvin and Hobbes, The Adventures of Tintin, Berkeley Breed's Bloom County, and Meryl Streep. At 12 years old, you know, because we live so close to New York City, you know, a theater mecca in the world, my creative output naturally shifted to the theater and being on stage, thus Meryl Streep. I wanted to act more than anything in the world, and I think that was my first glance at a future career that involved some kind of creative process. So then I switched from regular fiction to reading only theater plays. I also loved memorizing entire dialogues from movies so I could reenact them in front of my sisters, who were my first audiences. Poor things. I think the most powerful thing I learned back at this period of my life, maybe, you know, I could call it my aha moment, was that no one does anything alone. The day I realized that most of the artists that I looked up to all have creative partners, writers, collaborators surrounding them, helping them build their body of work. I was like, can you do that? Because I really thought that Seinfeld wrote all the serious episodes for himself. You know, when I realized he was surrounded by more than 20 writers, it just blew my mind, and then it all started to make sense. The understanding that collaboration is what made creators of pop culture so powerful was a clear signal for me that awesome work can't be connected to only one person, but to a group of people. So my plan from then on was to do the best work I could, singularly, in whichever profession I would choose a career in, so I could earn my way to access the best creative partners in the world and then have the chance to work alongside them. I love the phrase, "It's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit." Ironically, this came from Harry Truman, to many considered the worst president in the United States after Trump. My older brother was in a really good place in the industry as a copywriter in advertising. He was acting creative director at the time. So after finishing college, because I have a psychology degree, one day I gathered the courage to ask him if there was any room for, you know, to absorb another intern in the agency he was working at. And he kindly let me work with his team for almost 4 months, I guess. He taught me the importance of having good work ethics, gave me a north, and then on, I was ready to face the world. I remember clearly when I was working in an acting project when a very posh director warned us that we should never idolize anyone, no matter how good they were, because this automatically puts you in a position of inferiority in reference to this someone. And it puts a ceiling on your ambitions as well. So I focused on creating multiple fronts as sources of inspirations, like Books, people, movies, fashion, food, you know, the world was my source. At first, we wanted to show in a very simple, very powerful way how the lack of 30% of anything is not whimsy or dismissive at all. So we figured, if women earned on average only 70% of what men earned, what if all female singers in the world simply just stopped singing after 70% of their work was done? And then let people linger on what those leftover 30% meant. And you know how much that percentage impacted us all. It was one of the most awarded campaigns in the agency I worked for that year, and the project won 4 Lions and made the team and I really proud. This was a very ambitious project. Google called us and asked to help them design a viable storytelling structure using short sequential films, also known as YouTube's video ad sequencing products. So we opened the brief for the entire agency. Around 80 ideas were pitched to us. We selected 8 of them, that's 10%, which then became 4, half of it, and then the single winning idea. The story was inspired by one of UN's global goals, sustainable cities and communities. Inertia City is a short feature film that shows what could happen if one day the entire traffic of Sao Paulo just comes to a halt and stops for good. This project won 2 Lions for film and film craft, was played worldwide for more than 100,000 hours, and had over 74 million impressions. Great work is easy to sell, but you must have both clients and agency aligned every single step of the way in order to make an award-winning idea happen. And you must have stamina, maintain positivity to sell the same project 8 or 80 times if necessary. Because work that wins awards is never, I repeat, never easy. An anecdote about the hard work it takes to win, let's say, a Gold Cannes Lion is this. This year, a creative who won a Lion for an automobile campaign stormed the stage at Cannes to give back his award, claiming that the fumes from cars pollute our atmosphere, and so on. He was advocating for a more sustainable world, which is very appraisable. But when a person next to me heard the story, the first comment was, well, it probably wasn't a Gold Lion. So I guess the point is, great work, great creative, great study cases of the campaigns demand a lot of work and rework over and over again. I guess my greatest mistake when selling the first idea that became a Cannes Lion was the notion that it would be somehow easy. And it never is. But again, it's always worth it. I don't think this ever happened to me, but it's something I learned by watching my peers at work. Never, ever forget to give credit to those around you. Their collaboration is their biggest gift to you and the process. So be sure to celebrate efforts and never take the mistake of not giving credit when it's due. My role in this particular project was to simply get out of their way and let the most brilliant minds in the agency enjoy themselves in the process and just do their magic. I think it's just so important to know as a creative leader that sometimes the best thing you can do for your team, especially when you have such a trustworthy relationship like we do here at David, is to step back and just let them develop themselves as people and as professionals through the projects that they work on. First of all, the clients at Burger King Brazil know and believe in the power of great ideas. They want it just as much as we do, and they fully understand the power of creativity, that it's magical, it's precious, and we need to protect it. So our brief was simple. There was a need from the market to talk about games somehow in our campaign. But we noticed that audiences were saturated of seeing the gamer stereotype being portrayed everywhere, like with the silly gamer chair, the gamer headphones, the color gamer, keyboard. We then looked for a proprietary angle, a way in that no other brand but Burger King could do, making sure it was unprecedented and that spoke to a particular language that only gamers speak so well. So the team, one day came up with the glitches, which are usually subjects of complaints, but in our case, we managed to turn the negative into the positive by making it come to life in the most interesting way ever. The clients loved the idea, of course, because it was a perfect balance between embracing perfection, celebrating both culture and brand values, and just having a good old laugh along the way. As for struggles and obstacles, I mean, they were many and everywhere, like any good idea that challenges the status quo. And also, winning Lions is about intentional effort, both from the creative culture in the agency you work for and the clients that are hungry and prepared for groundbreaking creativity. That's teamwork in a nutshell, and there's no better way than that. First, we had to create a commercial showing the games to illustrate the funny glitches, but we didn't have the rights to any of the games. So our producer, Fernanda Peixoto, found this really great 3D production house, Vitor Zero, who created the fake games, pretending that they were games that actually exist, placing glitches in them, in a way that seemed kind of natural. I mean, if we wanted to speak with the heavy users in the gaming community, we just couldn't address them with the traditional pixeled iconography. Then we had to ask the tech guys at Burger King, who were trying so hard to make the best working app possible, to intentionally place glitches in it. I mean, after that, we evolved the glitch into other touch points for the consumers, like commercials, out of home, our sandwiches. We even created a glitched Burger King restaurant in the metaverse. I mean, the gaming community went wild, and it was great because, the campaign was responsible for great business results as well, like increasing the number of downloads for the BK app, and we ended up giving out more than about, 60,000 glitch coupons. It was wild. Our teams here at David have an intimate relationship with our clients, especially clients who come to us hungry for ideas, and clients that can also support great ideas when they see it. In the case of Burger Glitch, we all held our hands and went all in on this idea. We had zero issues with convincing the clients, mainly because Burger King as a brand is already such a potent creative force, and especially because it's being led by some of the most creative marketers in the world and in Brazil. It's a brand that thrives on being present on pop culture. I mean, these guys were awarded Brand of the Year at Cannes 2022, so they're, comfortable with pushing their communication to a place where they lead the share of voice on social and beyond in a way that only they can, usually by being relevant, challenging, provoking reflection, and many times entertaining their consumers. When our creative directors, Rogério Chaves and Fabrício Preto, came to us with the first thought of how they were thinking of putting the case study together using non-playable characters in games, usually where most of the glitches appear, I mean, when we saw the first edit with a glimpse of what they were thinking of coming up, it was like, wow, and the rest is history, I guess. When we found out that we won 5 Lions with this project alone, it was disbelief at first, then relief, then the tears came. But it felt great, like magic, kind of surreal. And then I felt really happy for the creatives and the clients who did, all the heavy lifting for the campaign. And if it's okay, I'd like to now take the opportunity to thank, from the agency side, our global CCO, Pancho Cassis, my working partner, who's Executive Creative Director, Edgar Janesi, our brilliant creative directors, Fabrício Preto and Rogério Chaves, the talented creatives who came up with the idea, Renata Simone and André Mizomo, and our creative tech partners, Marcelo Reis and Mikey Mako. Of course, there are a lot of other people, but these guys were, and if I were you watching this, I'd definitely look these guys up and send them my portfolio immediately. Of course, there were, so many others involved, but these guys were the epicenter of the project, the ones who took ownership of the challenge, and who are truly deserving of all the accolades. We all know how having work that wins the Cannes Lion on your portfolio does put you on a spotlight, and it places you on a more interesting path when choosing agencies to work for. Plus, I think the most creative agencies in the world are 24/7 on the lookout for new talents, rising stars, and are actually willing to bet heavy on them. So the feeling was basically this. I remember thinking, I hope that next year more and more opportunities present themselves to us like they did this year, so we can keep pushing ourselves harder towards more and more medal lions. You're only as good as the last idea you had. So this may sound simplistic, but the more you create, the better you get at creating. It's just simple math. So you should start to fall in love with the concept of the search for the next idea that will make you famous. I mean, after all, creativity is the most valuable asset in this industry. And I believe a long-lasting career is built on working hard at either being creative or recognizing when great creative is standing right in front of you. You don't have to be an artist to be creative. You just have to use your brain in different and unique ways to solve things. A great idea and a not so great idea are equally hard to publish. So make sure, since you're spending so much time working on a campaign, to make it the best you can be from the start. You know, we all know how easy it is to lazily solve a project rather than going the extra mile in order to find something greater out there. Either way, it will demand lots of time and effort from you. Make sure it's worth it. Plus, you should find an agency that lets you be hands-on, like David is. I think lots of the creative success that we've brewed along the years is a direct result of the culture. You know, it's a perfect mix of collaboration and brand consistency, creative leadership that is horizontal and that focuses on the purity of ideas. We've built a healthy business continuously because, like any great creative agency, we harvest talent, not infinite financial growth. Here, we practice radical collaboration.